Wang Cheng. Speaking of Wang Cheng, he was originally a child of an old bureaucratic family in Pingyuan County. He was lazy by nature, and his life became increasingly unstable. Later, only a few shabby houses were left, and he and his wife slept on shabby straw mats. They often complained about each other, and it was difficult to survive. It was a hot summer day, and there used to be a Zhou family's garden outside the village. The walls had collapsed and the house had collapsed, leaving only a pavilion. Many people in the village come here to stay and enjoy the cool air, including Wang Cheng. One day, after dawn, everyone who slept here left. When the sun rose 3 poles higher, Wang Chengkai got up and staggered to go home. Suddenly, he saw a golden hairpin in the grass. He picked it up and saw that it was engraved with the words, "Made in Yibin Mansion." Wang Cheng's grandfather turned out to be a guest of honor in Prince Hengong's palace. And many of the old things in his family were of this style, so Wang Cheng hesitated for a long time with the gold hairpin. At this time, an old woman came looking for a gold hairpin. Although Wang Cheng was poor, he had an upright character, and hurriedly took it out and gave it to her. The old woman was very happy and praised Wang Cheng's moral character, saying, "The gold hairpin is not worth a lot of money, but it is a relic of the late husband." Wang Cheng asked, "Who is your husband?" The old woman replied, "He is the late Yibin Wang Jianzi." Wang Cheng said in surprise, "That's my grandfather. How did you know each other?" The old woman also said in surprise, "Are you Wang Jianzi's grandson?" "I am the fox fairy. 100 years ago I had a good relationship with your grandfather. After your grandfather died, I lived in seclusion. I lost my gold hairpin when I passed by here today, and you happened to pick it up. Isn't this God's arrangement?" Wang Cheng also heard that his grandfather had a fox wife, so he believed it. "If it's an old lady, invite her to sit at home." The old woman went with him. Wang Cheng asked his wife to come out to meet him, but he saw her wearing tattered clothes, with a sallow complexion and thin skin. The old woman sighed and said, Wang Jianzi's grandson is so poor," seeing that there was no smoke in the old stove. The old woman said, "With such a family situation, how do you live on?" Wang's wife took advantage of the poverty. He described the situation in detail to the old woman, who couldn't help but sob and cry. The old woman gave the gold hairpin to the king's wife, and asked her to go to the market to pawn money to buy some rice, to survive for the time being, and see her again in 3 days. Wang Cheng persuaded her to stay, but the old woman said, "You can't support a wife. I am here, and you can only look up at the roof. There is nothing you can do. What's the use?" After that, she went away. Wang Cheng told his wife the origin of the old woman, and she was very scared. Wang Cheng praised her benevolence and righteousness, and asked his wife to serve her like his mother-in-law, and his wife agreed. 3 days later, the old lady came as expected. "Take out some silver and ask Wang Cheng to buy rice and noodles, 1 stone each." At night, she slept on the short bed with Wang Cheng's wife. The wife was scared at first, but later saw that she was sincere, and no longer had any doubts. The next day, the old woman said to Wang Cheng, "My grandson should stop being lazy and do some small business. How can you live in vain for a long time?" Wang Cheng told her that he had no capital. The old woman said, "When your grandfather was here, I had gold, silver, silk, and satin at my disposal. Because I was an outsider and didn't need these things, I didn't take any more. I only saved 40 taels of silver to buy pollen, which I still have. It's useless to keep it with me for a long time. You can buy it all into Jebu and rush to the capital immediately to sell it and make some profit." Wang Cheng listened to her and bought more than 50 pieces of Jebu. The old woman asked him to pack his bags immediately, and estimate that he could arrive in the capital in 6 or 7 days. He also told Wang Cheng, "Be diligent rather than lazy. Be fast rather than slow. If you arrive 1 day late, it will be too late to regret." Wang Cheng respectfully agreed, and took the goods on the road. Wang Cheng encountered rain on the way, and his clothes and shoes were soaked. He had never experienced the pain of wind and frost in his life, and he was exhausted, so he decided to rest in the hotel temporarily. Unexpectedly, it rained heavily all night, and the rain flowed from the eaves like ropes. After a night, the road became even more muddy and difficult to walk. Wang Cheng saw pedestrians coming and going with water up to their ankles, and he was afraid of suffering. It wasn't until noon that the rain stopped. But after a while, the clouds gathered and it started raining heavily again, so Wang Cheng had to stay one more night before leaving. When he was approaching the capital, he heard that the price of Jebu had soared, and Wang Cheng was secretly happy. After entering Beijing, he went to the inn to unpack his luggage. The owner was very sorry that he was late. It turned out that the road to the south had just been opened, and very few Jebu had been transported to the capital. Baylor Mansion was in a hurry to buy, and the price suddenly rose, 3 times more than usual. The amount had just been purchased the day before. Those who followed were disappointed. The shop owner told Wang Cheng the reason, and Wang Cheng was unhappy. One day later, more and more Jebu was shipped to the capital, and the price dropped even further. Wang Cheng refused to sell because there was no profit, so he delayed it for more than 10 days. He calculated that it would cost a lot of food and accommodation, which made him even more depressed and worried. The owner of the shop advised him to sell Jebu cheaply and switch to other businesses. Wang Cheng had no choice but to obey. He lost more than 10 taels of silver and got rid of all the cloth. When Wang Cheng got up in the morning, he was about to go back. When he opened his bag, he saw that all his money was gone. Wang Cheng panicked and told the owner that there was nothing he could do. Someone asked Wang Cheng to report to the government and asked the shop owner to pay back. Wang Cheng sighed and said, "This is my destiny. What does it have to do with the shopkeeper?" The shopkeeper was very grateful to him after hearing about it, and gave him 5 taels of silver as a gift to comfort him and let him go back. Wang Cheng himself considered that he was too embarrassed to go back to see his grandmother, hesitating and wandering inside and outside, and was in a dilemma. One day, Wang Cheng happened to see a quail fight, and he bet thousands of coins. Buying a quail often costs more than 100 coins. Suddenly, something moved in his mind. He calculated the money in his bag, and found that it was only enough to sell quails, so he went back to discuss with the owner of the shop. The owner of the shop tried his best to encourage him, and made an appointment to let him stay in the shop and take care of the food without charging him any money. Wang Cheng was very happy and set out on the road. He bought a load of quails and returned to the capital. The store owner was very happy and wished he would sell out soon. At night, it rained heavily until dawn. After dawn, the water on the street was like a river, but the rain still didn't stop. Wang Cheng had to stay in the store and wait for sunny weather. But it rained continuously for several days. Look inside the cage and see that the quails are slowly dying. Wang Cheng was so scared that he didn't know what to do. Another day passed, more died, and only a few remained, which were merged into a cage and kept. I checked again after a night and found only one alive. Wang Cheng told the store owner and couldn't help but burst into tears. The shop owner also cheered for him. Wang Cheng felt that he had lost all his money and could not return home, so he just wanted to die. The shop owner comforted him and went with him to see the surviving quail. After examining it carefully, the shop owner said, "This quail seems unusual. Those dead quails may not have been killed by it. If you have nothing to do now, just train it. If it is a good breed, use it too. You can make a living by gambling." Wang Cheng followed the owner's wishes. After he was tamed, the owner of the shop asked him to take it to the streets, where he could win, and eat. This quail is very strong, and has won several times. The shop owner was very happy, and gave Wang Cheng some money to gamble with the rich kids. He won again and again. After more than half a year, Wang Cheng accumulated 20 taels of silver, and gradually felt relieved and regarded the quail as if it were alive. At first, there was a great prince who was aggressive with quails. During the Lantern Festival, folk quail farmers were allowed to enter the palace to fight with their quails. The shop owner told Wang Cheng, It's easy to make a fortune now. What you don't know is your luck." So he told him about the quail fight in the prince's palace, took him with him, and told him if you lose, you will feel depressed. If you win the fight, the prince will definitely buy it, so don't agree. If he forcefully buys it, just look at my face and wait until I nod before agreeing to it. Wang Cheng said, "Okay." When they arrived at the palace, people who came to fight quails were already crowded under the palace steps. After a while, the prince walked out of the palace, and the entourage on the left and right announced, "Anyone who is willing to fight comes up." Immediately, there was a man holding the quail, and hurried up. The prince ordered the palace's quails to be released, and the guests also released their own. As soon as the two quails fought, the guests were defeated, and the prince laughed. After a while, several people were defeated on the stage. The shop owner said, "That's it." And Wang Cheng on stage. The prince looked at Wang Cheng's quail and said, "There are angry veins in the eyes. This is a ferocious and fighting bird. Don't underestimate the enemy." He ordered a quail named Tizui to fight. After a leaping fight, the palace quail was defeated. A better one was chosen again, but one was replaced, and the other was defeated. The prince hurriedly ordered to fetch the jade quail from the palace. After a while, someone came out with the quail. I saw that it was all white, like a heron, and its horse was extraordinary. Wang Cheng became timid, knelt down and begged to stop, saying, "Your Majesty's quail is a sacred object. I'm afraid of hurting my bird and ruining my job." The prince smiled and said, "Let it go. If you die in the fight, I will compensate you heavily." Wang Cheng then released the quail, and the prince's jade quail rushed towards him. At this time, Wang Cheng's one was lying there waiting like an angry chicken. The jade quail pecked suddenly, and Wang Cheng's quail suddenly flew up and attacked it like a crane. The two quails flew up and down, and after a long stalemate, the jade quails gradually gave up. But Wang Cheng became more energetic and brave, and the more he fought, the more anxious he became. After a while, the jade quail's snow-white feathers were pecked off one after another, and he flew away with his wings down. The thousands of people watching around all admired Wang Cheng's quail. The prince then brought the quail over and held it in his hand, examining it from beak to claws. He then asked Wang Cheng, "Do you want to sell your quail?" Wang Cheng replied, "I don't have much property as a villain. I don't care about it. We depend on each other for our lives and don't want to sell it." The prince said, "I will give you a good price, and you can get the property of a middle-class family immediately. Are you willing?" Wang Cheng lowered his head and thought for a long time, and said, "I was not willing to sell it. Since the king likes it so much, if the king can really let me get a share, what else can I ask for? An inheritance that will provide me with enough food and clothing?" The prince then asked the price, and Wang Cheng replied, 1,000 taels of silver. The prince smiled and said, "Foolish man. What kind of treasure is this? Is it worth 1,000 taels of silver?" Wang Cheng said, "The king does not think it is a treasure, but I, my subject, think that the priceless jade is not as valuable as it." The prince said, "Why?" Wang Cheng said, "The villain takes it to the market to gamble and fight, and every time he can get a few taels of silver, which can be exchanged for rice. A family of more than 10 people depends on it for food, and they do not suffer from hunger or cold. Worry, what treasure can compare with it?" The prince said, "I will not treat you badly. I will give you 200 taels of silver." Wang Cheng shook his head. The prince added another 100 taels. Wang Cheng glanced at the shop owner and saw that the shop owner didn't make any move, so he said, "Thanks to the king for buying it. I am willing to reduce the price by 100 taels, and sell it for 900 taels of silver." The prince said, "Forget it. Who is willing to exchange 900 taels of silver for a quail?" Wang Cheng pretended to be a quail, and was about to leave. The prince hurriedly shouted, "The people who raise quails are back. The people who raise quails are back. I am honest. I'll give you 600 taels of silver. If you're willing to sell it, otherwise, forget it." Wang Cheng looked at the shop owner again, but he still had no expression. Wang Cheng was very satisfied in his heart, and was afraid of losing this opportunity. So he said, "I am really reluctant to sell it to you for this amount. But if the transaction fails after asking for half the sky-high price, I cannot afford to offend the prince. There is no other way. I have no choice but to do as the prince wants." The prince was very happy, and immediately weighed out the money and handed it to him. Wang Cheng packed up the silver and came out to thank him for the reward. The shop owner complained, "What did I say? You are so anxious to make the decision to sell it yourself. If you pay the price again, you can get 800 taels of silver." After Wang Cheng went back, he threw the silver on the table and asked the shop owner to take it. The shop owner didn't want it. Wang Cheng gave in again and again before the shop owner settled his meal money and accepted it. Wang Cheng packed up his clothes and returned home. He described his experience in detail and gave everyone money to share the happiness. The old lady asked him to buy 300 acres of fertile land, build a house and buy furniture, and the aristocratic family scene of his ancestors was restored. The old woman gets up very early every day and asks Wang Cheng to supervise the servants in farming. Wang Cheng's wife supervises the family to weave. If they were a little lazy, the old woman would scold them. The couple stuck to their duties and did not dare to complain. 3 years later, when the family became richer, the old woman said goodbye and left. The couple worked together to persuade her to stay, and the old woman didn't stay until she shed tears of sadness. But the next morning, when the couple went to say hello, the old woman had disappeared.